I am Lauren, 34 years old, and my brother threw my $3,000 work laptop into a swimming pool because I wouldn't give him $10,000 in cash on a Sunday afternoon. Before I tell you about the absolute legal and financial nightmare I unleashed on him in return, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let me take you back to that day. It was a Sunday in Phoenix. If you've ever been to Phoenix in late spring, you know the heat is starting to creep in, that dry heat that feels like opening an oven door. We were at my parents' house for a barbecue. It was supposed to be a relaxing afternoon. The smell of charcoal and burgers was in the air. My dad was manning the grill with his world's okayest golfer apron on, and my mom was bustling around with potato salad. It was the picture of a perfect American family Sunday. Except it wasn't. It never really was with us. I was sitting at the patio table, under the shade of the umbrella. I run a digital marketing agency. It's my business. I built it from the ground up, starting with nothing but a beat-up computer and a lot of caffeine. Now it's successful. I have employees, I have clients, and I have deadlines. So even on a Sunday, I had my MacBook Pro open. I was finalizing a strategy deck for a new client launch on Monday morning. That's when Brian walked over. My brother Brian is 2 years older than me. He's 36. But if you looked at us, you'd think he was the younger sibling who still hadn't figured life out. He was wearing swim trunks that were a little too loose and holding a beer, even though it was barely noon. Brian has always been the creative one. That's what my mom calls it. He's an artist. He makes these sculptures out of recycled scrap metal. Sometimes he sells one for $50 at a flea market. Most of the time, they sit in my parents' garage gathering dust. He pulled out a chair opposite me, spun it around, and straddled it, looking at me with that grin he uses when he wants something. I knew that grin. I've known that grin my entire life. It usually costs me money. "Lauren," he said, taking a sip of his beer. "So, I've got this opportunity." I didn't even look up from my screen. I just kept typing. "What is it this time, Brian? A new welding torch? A booth at the county fair?" "No, no." He waved his hand dismissively. "Bigger. Much bigger. My buddy Steve, you know Steve, right? He knows a guy who is opening a gallery downtown. High-end stuff. They want to feature local industrial artists. It's my big break, Lori." I stopped typing. I looked at him. "That sounds great, Brian. Congratulations." "Yeah, well, there's a catch," he said, leaning in. "To secure the spot and get the materials I need for the showcase piece, it's going to be massive, Lori, like 6 feet tall. I need some capital. Up front." "How much?" I asked, though I already felt my stomach tightening. 10 grand, he said. He said it so casually, like he was asking to borrow a cup of sugar. "Just 10,000. I'll pay you back as soon as the pieces sell. You know these rich types, they pay thousands for rustic industrialism." I sighed. I closed my eyes for a second. $10,000. Again. "Brian," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I can't give you $10,000. Lend," he corrected. "Lend me, not give. You still owe me $4,000 from the vintage restoration business you started last year," I reminded him. "And $2,000 from the time your transmission blew out. And I'm pretty sure I paid for your dental work in January." His face darkened. The playful grin vanished instantly. This is the other side of Brian. The side that hates being told no. "You have it," he snapped. "I know you have it. You just bought that new Audi. You're always posting about your business trips. You're sitting on piles of cash, and you won't help your own brother." "My business money is for my business," I said, my voice getting a little firmer. "I have payroll, Brian. I have taxes. I don't just have stacks of cash lying around for you to play art gallery with." The answer is no. I turned back to my screen. I wanted to signal that the conversation was over. I started typing again. Brian stood up. His shadow fell over my keyboard. "So that's it?" he asked. His voice was loud now, loud enough that I saw my dad look over from the grill. "You're just going to let my dream die because you're a greedy snob?" "I'm not a snob, Brian. I'm responsible. Maybe you should try getting a part-time job to fund your art, I said, not looking up. That was the trigger. I saw the movement in my peripheral vision, but I wasn't fast enough. Brian's hand shot out. He didn't grab my arm. He didn't grab the table. He grabbed my open laptop. In one fluid motion, he swung his arm back and launched it. It wasn't a clumsy toss. It was a hard throw. I watched in slow motion as my silver MacBook Pro, my entire business, my client files, my life's work, sailed through the air. It sparkled in the Phoenix sun for a split second before it hit the water. Splash. It didn't float. It sank straight to the bottom of the deep end, bubbling as it went down. The screen flickered blue under the water, then went black. The backyard went dead silent. The only sound was the sizzling of burgers on the grill. My mouth hung open. I looked at the pool. I looked at Brian. He was standing there, dusting his hands off on his swim trunks, a smirk plastered across his face. He looked proud of himself. Oops, he sneered. Guess that's what happens when you won't lend me 10 grand. Maybe next time you'll think about who you're saying no to. I was shaking. I wasn't crying. I was vibrating with a rage so pure and hot I thought I might actually pass out. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the concrete. Dad, I yelled, turning to the grill. Did you see that? He just destroyed my computer. That's a $3,000 machine. All my work is on there. I expected my father to come rushing over. I expected him to grab Brian by the ear. I expected outrage. I expected justice. My dad flipped a burger. He didn't even look at me. He took a sip of his iced tea and shrugged his shoulders. Well, Lauren, Dad said, his voice flat and unbothered. That's the price you pay for shutting out your own brother. You know how passionate he is. You shouldn't have provoked him. I stared at him. Provoked him? I said no to a loan. You have the means, my mom chimed in, walking out of the kitchen with a bowl of coleslaw. She'd heard the commotion. Family helps family, Lauren. You know Brian has been struggling to find his footing. If you had just written the check, none of this would have happened. You can buy a new computer. Brian can't buy a new spirit once it's crushed. I looked at them, really looked at them. There was Brian, smirking like a schoolyard bully who knows the teacher won't punish him. There was my dad, indifferent, blaming me for my own property being destroyed. There was my mom, guilt-tripping me for being successful. It was a tableau of my entire life. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't a loud snap. It wasn't a screaming match. It was a quiet, cold severance. It was the sound of a bridge burning down to the waterline. I didn't scream. I didn't jump in the pool to save the laptop. It was dead anyway. I picked up my purse. I picked up my car keys. Where are you going? Brian called out, laughing. You gonna go cry in your fancy car? Don't forget. We're eating in 10 minutes. Leaving, I said softly. What about your computer? Dad asked, finally looking concerned, but only because I was disrupting the flow of the barbecue. You can't leave that in the pool. It'll clog the filter. I looked at my father. Brian put it there. Brian can get it out. I turned around and walked through the side gate. I heard Brian laughing behind me. Run away, Richie Rich. That's right. Go buy another one. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I sat there for a full minute, just breathing. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles were white. They thought this was just another tantrum. They thought I would cool off, come back next week, buy a new laptop, and probably write Brian a check out of guilt because Mom would call me crying about how fragile he is. That's how the script always went. But they didn't know that I had just rewritten the script. I started the engine. I didn't know it yet, but as I pulled away from that curb, I was initiating a sequence of events that would bring my brother's world crashing down before the sun came up the next morning. As I drove down the I-10, heading back towards my place in Tempe, the silence in the car was heavy. Usually I'd have a podcast on or I'd be taking a client call. But today I needed the silence to count. I needed to count exactly what my generosity had cost me over the years. You see, to understand why throwing that laptop was the final straw, you have to understand the dynamic in the Mitchell house. It's a dynamic I'm sure a lot of you watching this are familiar with. There's the golden child, who can do no wrong, no matter how many times they screw up. And then there's the responsible one, the safety net, the ATM, the fixer. I was the fixer. Brian was the mess. Since we were teenagers, it was always the same story. Brian was sensitive. Brian was an artist. Brian couldn't handle the pressure of traditional school or a 9-to-5 job or paying bills. When he quit the community college 2 weeks into the semester because the professor stifled his creativity, my parents applauded his bravery. When I worked 2 jobs to put myself through business school, they asked why I was so obsessed with money. The disparity grew as we got older. I started my agency. I worked 18-hour days. I ate ramen so I could invest in software. I built something real. Brian drifted. He was a DJ for a while, then a personal trainer. Then he got into crypto investment, which was just him losing $5,000 of my dad's retirement money. But here is where it gets sticky. Here is where I became part of the problem. Because I was successful and because I craved my parents' approval, which they withheld like it was a limited resource, I started paying for things. I thought if I made their lives easier, they would finally look at me and say, "Good job, Lauren. We're proud of you." I was wrong. All I did was train them to see me as a bank account. Driving home that afternoon, with the image of my laptop sinking into the chlorine water burned into my retina, I started to mentally tally the list. It wasn't just the laptop. It was everything. First, there was the phone bill. 5 years ago, my mom asked if I could add Brian to my family plan because he was between jobs and needed a phone for interviews. I said yes. I have been paying his bill, including the data overages and the upgrades to the newest iPhone every year ever since. That's about $120 a month. For 5 years. Do the math. That's over $7,000. Then there were the subscriptions. Brian didn't pay for anything digital. My Netflix, he used it. My Hulu, my HBO Max, my Amazon Prime. He even used my Canva Pro account for his art designs. He had the passwords to everything. I was effectively subsidizing his entertainment and his career. But those were the small things. The big things were the ones that made my blood boil now that the fog was lifting. The Jeep. 2 years ago, Brian's old sedan finally died. He needed a car to get to gigs. My credit was immaculate. His was a dumpster fire. My dad called me begging. "Just co-sign, Lauren. He'll make the payments." He promised. He's turning a leaf. Co-signed. And guess what? Brian made exactly 2 payments. After the 3rd month, the bank called me. I didn't want my credit ruined, so I just started paying it. For $150 a month. Plus the insurance, because Brian can't afford full coverage, Lauren, and you know how he drives. So, I was paying for a Jeep Wrangler that I didn't drive. Brian drove it. He drove it to the beach. He drove it to parties. He treated it like his birthright. And the biggest one of all, the condo. I bought a 2-bedroom condo in Tempe a few years back as an investment property. It was supposed to be a rental to generate passive income. When Brian got evicted from his apartment for, you guessed it, not paying rent, my mom cried for 3 days. "He'll be on the streets, Lauren. How can you let your brother happen?" So, I let him move into the condo. Just for a few months, we agreed. Until he gets back on his feet. That was 18 months ago. He has never paid a dime of rent. Not a single cent. The market rate for that unit is $1,800 a month. I was covering the mortgage, the HOA fees, and the property taxes. I was literally housing him for free while he told me I was a greedy snob for not giving him 10 grand cash. The audacity was breathtaking. I gripped the steering wheel harder. The heat of the afternoon was fading, but the heat inside me was just building up pressure. I thought about the word inheritance. It's a funny word in our family. My parents aren't rich, but they have a house and some savings. They've always made jokes. Jokes that aren't really jokes. That Lauren doesn't need anything when we die. She has her own money. The implication was always that everything they had would go to Brian, because he needs the help. So, Not only was I supporting him now, but I was also effectively being disinherited in favor of him. I was working to support the person who would eventually get everything else, too. I realized something profound on that drive. My father was right. He said, "That's the price you pay." He meant it as a punishment for saying no. But I took it as a wake-up call. I had been paying a price. I had been paying the keep the peace tax. I had been paying the buy mom's love fee. I had been paying the guilt subscription. And today the price had gone up too high. A $3,000 laptop was the surcharge that broke the bank. I pulled into my driveway. My house was quiet. It was mine. I paid for it. I walked inside, and the first thing I did was go to my office. I had an old backup laptop in the closet. It was slow and the battery sucked, but it connected to the internet. I sat down at my desk. I didn't cry. I didn't call my best friend to vent. I didn't pour a glass of wine. I needed a clear head. I opened a blank document. I typed a header in bold, capital letters. The cutoff list. I was going to treat this like a business project. Brian was a liability, a non-performing asset, a drain on resources. And in business, when you have a liability that is destroying the company, you don't negotiate with it. You liquidate it. I started typing. AT&T Family Plan. Streaming services. All. Canva Pro. The Jeep Wrangler. Co-signed. The condo. 342 Maple Street. The emergency credit card. Wait, the credit card. I froze. I had forgotten about that. About 6 months ago, Brian had a medical emergency. He claimed he twisted his ankle and needed x-rays. He didn't have insurance. I gave him an authorized user card on one of my business accounts, strictly for medical emergencies. I told him to destroy it after he used it at the urgent care. I logged into my American Express portal. My hands hovered over the keyboard. I was almost afraid to look. I clicked on transactions. My jaw hit the floor. There were charges from yesterday, and the day before, and last week. Liquor Barn, $145.50 GameStop, $60 Shell gas station, $55 Ticketmaster, $300 the Downtown Club, $210 he hadn't destroyed the card. He had kept it, and he had been slowly siphoning money off it, probably hoping the charges would get lost in my massive monthly business expenses. The total for this month alone was over $2,400. That wasn't borrowing. That wasn't family helping family. That was theft. That was credit card fraud. I looked at the screen, and for the first time that day I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who just found the ammunition she needed to win a war. "Okay, Brian," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play games? Let's play." I picked up my phone. It was 7 p.m. on a Sunday. Most businesses were closed, but automated systems never sleep. And lawyers? Good lawyers check their email on Sunday nights. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to get to work. The sun had set, and the desert air was finally cooling down, but I was on fire. I had my list and I had my strategy. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about survival. I realized that if I didn't stop this now, he would bleed me dry until I had nothing left, and my parents would just hand him the shovel to bury me. I started with the easiest things first, the petty things, the things that would annoy him instantly. I logged into Netflix. I went to Settings and hit Sign out of all devices. Then I changed the password to a randomly generated string of 20 characters that no one could guess. I did the same for Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO, Spotify, and even the Canva account he used for his art. Felt petty, I admit, but thinking about him sitting on his couch, trying to watch a movie after destroying my livelihood, and suddenly seeing that incorrect password screen, it gave me a rush of dopamine. Next, the phone. I dialed 611 for AT&T. Even on a Sunday evening, the automated system works. I navigated through the menus. Manage lines. I selected the number ending in 4599, Brian's number. Option. Suspend service. I hesitated for a split second. Suspending it would just turn it off temporarily. That wasn't enough. Option. Cancel line. I selected it. The automated voice warned me about early termination fees. I didn't care. I would pay a few $100 to never hear his voice on my bill again. I confirmed the cancellation. Effective immediately. His screen would go black. No data. No calls. No texts. He was digitally stranded. Now for the heavy artillery. I looked at the Jeep. I called the financing bank's 24-hour hotline. I navigated to the collections and repossession department. I knew I couldn't talk to a human until morning, but I could flag the account. Here's the thing about that loan. I was the cosigner, but the title was in both our names. However, since I was the only one making payments, and the loan was technically in default because he hadn't paid, I was paying to cure the default every month. I had leverage. I sent a secure message through the banking portal. Subject: voluntary repossession/location of vehicle. I wrote, I am the cosigner on this loan. The primary borrower has refused to make payments for 24 months. I am stopping my courtesy payments immediately. The vehicle is located at address of my condo. The keys are likely inside the residence. I am authorizing immediate repossession of the asset to mitigate further loss. I knew this would ding my credit score. A repo never looks good. But my score was 810. I could take a 50-point hit if it meant getting that leech off my back. It was collateral damage I was willing to accept. Then the condo. This was the big one. I opened my email client and drafted a message to Andrew Cole. Andrew is my business attorney. He's a shark. He handled a contract dispute for me last year and made the other guys cry. Subject: eviction notice. Urgent. 342 Maple Street. Andrew, I need to initiate eviction proceedings against the tenant at my Maple Street property immediately. There is no written lease, but he has been there for 18 months. He has paid 0 rent. He is family, but that ends today. I want him out. Prepare a formal notice to quit, or whatever the Arizona law requires for a squatter. I want it served by a process server. Do not send it by mail. I want someone to knock on the door and hand it to him. Also, be advised, he has caused malicious destruction of my personal property, laptop, valued at $3,000, and has committed credit card fraud on my business account totaling $2,400. I am considering pressing criminal charges. Let's discuss options in the morning. Best, Lauren. I hit send. Finally, the credit card. I called the American Express fraud line. This one had a human operator 24/7. American Express, this is Sarah. How can I help you? Hi, Sarah. I said, my voice steady. I need to report unauthorized use of a card. I gave an authorized user card to an employee for a specific one-time medical expense, and I've just discovered they have been using it for personal entertainment and liquor for months. I did not authorize these charges. I see, Sarah said, her tone shifting to professional concern. We can certainly open a fraud investigation. We will cancel that card number immediately. Can you verify the specific transactions? I spent the next 20 minutes reading off Brian's bar tabs and video game purchases. Okay, Sarah said. We've locked the account. We will send a fraud affidavit for you to sign. And Ms. Mitchell, since the amount is over $2,000, and it crosses state lines if any online vendors are involved, this is a felony level of fraud. Do you want to pursue legal action against the user? I paused. This was my brother. If I said yes, he could go to jail. Not just family jail where mom yells at him, but real jail. Federal jail, potentially. I thought about the splash. I thought about his smirk. I thought about, that's the price you pay. Yes, I said. He stole from my company. I want to pursue it. Understood, she said. We will cooperate with the authorities. I hung up. I sat back in my chair. It was midnight. I had just dismantled his entire life. His phone was dead. His entertainment was gone. His car was flagged for repo. His home was about to be foreclosed on him. His free money card was now a felony investigation. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't guilt. I waited for the guilt, The old familiar friend that usually showed up whenever I didn't give Brian what he wanted. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt lighter. I realized that for years, I had been holding up the sky for him. I was Atlas, straining under the weight of his bad decisions. And tonight I had just shrugged. I wasn't holding it up anymore. And gravity was about to do its job. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood by the window looking out at the street. I knew the storm was coming. I knew my phone would blow up. I knew my parents would scream. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care. I was ready. I went to bed, but I set my phone to do not disturb, with one exception. The security company that monitors my condo. If the alarm went off, I wanted to know. Otherwise, the world could burn until 6 a.m. I closed my eyes, and surprisingly, I slept like a baby. The next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my curtains. I rolled over and grabbed my phone. The screen was lit up with notifications. 14 missed calls from Brian before I cut the line. 8 missed calls from Mom. 3 missed calls from Dad. 27 text messages. I unlocked the phone and scrolled to the texts. The first few from Brian were from last night, around 2 a.m., probably when he realized Netflix wasn't working. Brian, 2:14 a.m. Dude, did you change the Netflix password? I'm trying to watch a movie with a girl. Brian, 2:20 a.m. Hello? Lauren, stop being a brat. Brian, 3:05 a.m. Why isn't my Amazon Prime working? I need to order stuff. Then, the tone changed. This must have been when the phone service cut out, and he had to get on Wi-Fi to use iMessage. Brian, 6:02 a.m. Why does my phone say SOS only? Brian, 6:15 a.m. Lauren, fix this now. I have people calling me about the gallery. Brian, 6:30 a.m. MOM says you cut my phone off. Are you insane? And then, the text that made me sit up and grin. It came in at 7:15 a.m., just a few minutes ago. Brian, 7:15 a.m. Lauren. There is a tow truck in the driveway. He says he has an order to take the Jeep. Tell him to stop. This isn't funny. I swung my legs out of bed. The game was on. I didn't reply to the texts. Rule number 1 of warfare. Maintain radio silence. Let the enemy panic. I got up, showered, and put on my best power suit. Navy blue, sharp shoulders. I put on makeup. I wanted to look like the CEO I was, not the little sister they bullied. I made coffee, listening to the desperate buzzing of my phone on the counter. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called the towing company. Not to stop them, but to confirm. This is Lauren Mitchell. You have an order for a 2021 Jeep Wrangler at 342 Maple. Yes, ma'am, the dispatcher said. Driver is on site. We had a bit of an issue with the resident. He tried to block the driveway with a trash can, but we got the vehicle hooked up. It's en route to the impound lot now. Excellent, I said. Thank you. I hung up and checked my email. Andrew, my lawyer, was already awake. From Andrew Cole, subject. Eviction notice Lauren. I've drafted the notice to quit. Since there is no lease and no rent paid under Arizona law, he is technically a tenant at will. We have to give him 30 days notice to vacate. However, given the destruction of property and the credit card fraud you mentioned, we can file for an immediate and irreparable breach, which could get him out in 24 hours if we can prove he is a danger to the property. Do you want me to file the police report for the fraud first? That strengthens the eviction case. I typed back, file it. Go for the throat, Andrew. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I stared at the screen. Mom. A word that used to mean comfort now just meant manipulation. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again immediately. And again. I finally answered on the 4th ring. I put it on speaker and set it on the counter while I poured my coffee. Lauren Elizabeth Mitchell. Her voice was shrill. She was crying. What have you done? Brian just called me from a neighbor's Wi-Fi because you cut his phone off. He says they took his car. He says he's stranded. Good morning, Mom, I said calmly. Yes, I stopped paying for the phone I've been paying for 5 years. And I stopped paying for the car he was supposed to pay for. Naturally, the bank took it back. How could you be so cruel? She sobbed. He has a meeting today. For his art. You're sabotaging him on purpose because of that stupid laptop. Stupid laptop? I repeated. That was my business, Mom. That was my property. And he destroyed it with a smile on his face. And you watched. You and Dad stood there and told me it was my fault. He was stressed, she yelled. He apologized. He said, oops. I corrected her. That's not an apology. And by the way, Mom, did you know your precious son stole $2,000 from my company credit card to buy liquor and video games? Did he mention that part? Silence on the other end. A long, heavy silence. He wouldn't do that, she stammered. Maybe he borrowed it. He intended to pay you back. He stole it, I said firmly, and I've reported it as fraud. The police might be paying him a visit soon. So if I were you, I'd tell him to start packing. Because the eviction notice is coming next. Eviction. She sounded like she was choking. You can't kick your brother out of his home. It's not his home, Mom. It's my house. He's a squatter. And I'm done. I hung up. I felt a tremor in my hand, but I steadied it. It was hard. I won't lie to you guys. Hearing your mother cry is hard. Even when you know she's wrong. It's hardwired into our biology to want to fix it. But I had to remind myself. She isn't crying for me. She's crying because her enabling system just broke. I decided to go into my office early. I needed to be around sane people. I needed to be around my employees who respected me. I drove to my office building. My staff greeted me. Morning, Lauren. Love the suit, Lauren. It was a different world. Here I was competent. I was fair. I was a leader. Around 10 a.m., my receptionist, Jessica, buzzed me. Lauren? Her voice was tight. There's a gentleman here to see you. He says he's your brother. He doesn't look well. My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected him to come here. I figured without a car he was stuck. But I forgot about Uber. Or maybe Mom drove him. Does he have an appointment? I asked, knowing the answer. No. He's demanding to come back. He's kind of shouting, Lauren. He's scaring the other clients in the waiting room. I stood up. Call security, Jessica. Do not let him back here. I'm coming out. I wasn't going to hide in my office. This was my turf. I walked out to the lobby. The scene was chaotic. Brian was standing there at the front desk. He looked rough. He was wearing gray sweatpants and a stained hoodie. His hair was messy. He looked like he hadn't slept. He was leaning over the desk, pointing a finger at Jessica. I know she's in there. Tell her to come out or I'm walking back there, he screamed. Brian, I said sharply. He spun around. His eyes were wild. Bloodshot. You. He marched toward me. You bitch. You ruined everything. Security. A large man named Dave, who I hired last year, stepped in front of me. Sir, step back. Brian stopped, but he was vibrating with rage. You took my car. You cut my phone. I missed the meeting with Steve. The gallery is gone. Lauren, my big break. You killed it. You killed it yourself, I said, my voice cold. You threw my laptop in a pool. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Did you think I was just going to keep writing checks while you spit in my face? It was a laptop, he screamed, his voice cracking. I'm your brother. People are more important than things. Dad was right. You're just a heartless corporate shill. I'm a shill who pays for your life, I said. Or I was. Past tense. I'm done, Brian. The free ride is over. The phone is gone. The car is gone. And Andrew is sending over the eviction notice today. You have 30 days to get out of my condo. If you damage anything on your way out, even a scratch on the wall, I will sue you for every penny you don't have. You can't do that. He lunged forward. Dave, the security guard, grabbed him by the shoulder. Brian tried to shake him off. He was flailing, looking ridiculous and pathetic. Let go of me, Brian yelled. He looked at me, desperate now. Lauren, please. Okay. I'm sorry about the computer. I'll fix it. I'll, I'll make you a sculpture. Just call the bank. Get the Jeep back. Please. I can't look like a loser in front of my friends. You are a loser, Brian, I said. It was harsh, but it was the truth that no one had ever told him. And I'm not fixing it this time. I'm going to tell Mom, he shouted as Dave began to drag him toward the glass doors. I'm going to tell everyone what a monster you are. Tell them, I said, but tell them from a payphone. Dave shoved him out the front door and locked it. Brian stood there for a moment, banging on the glass, mouthing obscenities. Then, realizing everyone in the lobby was staring at him, he pulled his hood up and stormed off down the sidewalk. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Jessica looked at me with wide eyes. Lauren, are you okay? I'm fine, I said, straightening my jacket. Actually, I'm better than fine. Jessica, call Andrew Cole for me. Tell him to expedite that police report. I walked back to my office. My hands were shaking a little, but my head was clear. The war was fully engaged, and I was winning. The confrontation in the lobby was the adrenaline spike. The aftermath was the legal grind. That afternoon, I met with Andrew. We went over the fraud affidavit. Seeing the charges on paper, black and white proof of his theft, made it easier. It wasn't borrowing. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was crime. Once we file this, Andrew warned me, tapping the paper with his pen, it's out of your hands. The district attorney picks it up. You can't just drop charges later if your mom guilt trips you. He could be looking at probation, restitution, or even jail time depending on his record. He has a clean record, I said, because my dad always talked the cops out of it, or paid them off, or I paid the damages. Well, Andrew said, that safety net is gone. Are you sure? I thought about the laptop in the pool. File it. Andrew nodded and sent the eviction notice via a process server. We timed it so it would arrive that evening, when Brian would likely be back at the condo, assuming he found a way to get there. I went home around 6 p.m. I expected my parents to be there, waiting for an ambush. I was surprised to find the driveway empty. But my phone was a war zone. My Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, who lives in Florida and hasn't seen us in 5 years, had posted a long rant on Facebook. She didn't tag me, but she didn't have to. So sad when money changes people. Families should stick together no matter what. Some people forget where they came from and think material possessions are more important than their own flesh and blood. Praying for my nephew who is being treated so unfairly by those who should love him. I read it and laughed. I actually laughed. I clicked block. Then I saw the notification from my security system. Motion detected at front door condo. I opened the app on my phone. The camera feed showed a process server handing a thick envelope to Brian. Brian looked even worse than he had in the morning. He took the envelope, ripped it open, read the first page, and then threw it on the ground. He looked directly at the doorbell camera. He knew I was watching and flipped the bird. Then he slammed the door. At 7 p.m., the chaos escalated. My doorbell rang. It was the police. My heart skipped a beat. Had he called the cops on me? I opened the door. 2 officers stood there. Officer Hayes, I read on his badge. He looked tired. Ms. Lauren Mitchell? Yes. We're responding to a call regarding a disturbance at 342 Maple Street. A Mr. Brian Mitchell is claiming you have illegally locked him out of his residence and stole his vehicle. I invited them in. Officers, I didn't lock him out. He has keys. I served him an eviction notice today. As for the vehicle, it was repossessed by the bank because he hasn't made payments in 2 years. I showed them the paperwork. I showed them the loan default notice. I showed them the copy of the eviction notice Andrew had filed. Officer Hayes looked over the documents. He nodded. This looks like a civil matter, mostly, but he's over there causing a scene. He's kicking the door, claiming his key doesn't work. I didn't change the locks, I said honestly. Not yet. Well, we're going to go back over there and tell him to calm down, Hayes said. But Ms. Mitchell, he mentioned something about Theft? He says you stole his property. He's projecting, I said. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the fraud affidavit Andrew had prepared. Actually, officers, while you are here, I need to file a report against him. For credit card fraud. Over $2,000. The officers looked at each other. The dynamic of the call just shifted entirely. Do you have evidence? Hayes asked. I laid out the statements, the highlighted charges, the affidavit from American Express. He's at the condo now? Hayes asked, his hand drifting to his radio. Yes, unless he walked away. Okay, we'll go have a talk with him. They left. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall. I knew what was happening. They were going to go over there, run his ID, see the report I just filed, and possibly arrest him right then and there. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dad. I answered. You had him arrested, Dad said. His voice was low. Dangerous. He committed a crime, Dad. He's your brother, Dad roared. I had never heard him yell like that. I'm at the station now. They have him in handcuffs. Lauren, handcuffs. Like a common criminal. They're saying it's a felony. How could you? He stole from me. I yelled back. He stole from my business. He destroyed my property. You stood there and watched him throw my livelihood in a pool and you shrugged. You shrugged. Dad. You told me it was the price I pay. Well, this is the price he pays. Drop the charges, Dad demanded. I will pay you back. I'll dip into the retirement fund. I'll write you a check right now for the $2,000. Just drop the charges and get him out. No, I said. What? No, I don't want your money. I don't want you to bail him out again. He needs to learn. He is 36 years old, Dad. He isn't a child. He's a grown man who throws tantrums and steals. If you bail him out, that's on you. But I am not dropping the charges. I am testifying. I am showing the judge the receipts. If you do this, Dad said, his voice shaking, don't bother coming to Christmas. Don't bother coming to Thanksgiving. You are tearing this family apart. The family was already broken, I said, tears finally stinging my eyes. I'm just the one who stopped pretending it wasn't. You're dead to me, Dad said, and he hung up. I sat there in the silence of my living room. You're dead to me. The words hung in the air. I should have been devastated. I should have been wailing on the floor. But the strange thing was, I wasn't. I felt safe. For the first time in years, I was safe from them. I was safe from the drain. I was safe from the drama. The worst thing they could do was disown me. And they just did. The weapon they had held over my head my entire life, their approval and presence, had been fired, and I was still standing. I poured myself a glass of wine. I walked to my back patio. I looked at my own pool. It was clean. The water was blue. There were no laptops at the bottom. My phone buzzed one more time. It was Andrew. Andrew. Police confirmed they picked him up. He's being booked. Arraignment is tomorrow morning. Do you want to be there? I typed back. No. I have a business to run. The next few weeks were a blur of legal paperwork and emotional silence. Brian spent 2 nights in jail before my parents managed to scrape together the bail money. They took out a second mortgage on their house, the house I was supposed to inherit, technically, to pay for a high-priced criminal defense attorney. That was the irony. They wouldn't help me when my property was destroyed, but they would mortgage their future to keep Brian from facing the consequences of his own actions. I stood my ground. The district attorney, a sharp woman named Rodriguez, told me that because the amount was significant and the evidence was undeniable, video game purchases are hard to explain as medical emergencies. They had him dead to rights. They offered a plea deal. Brian would plead guilty to a lesser charge of misdemeanor theft and destruction of property. He would serve 30 days of community service, be on probation for 2 years, and, this was the kicker, he had to pay full restitution to me. $2,400 for the credit card and $3,000 for the laptop. If he missed a payment or violated probation, he went to jail for 6 months. He took the deal. I didn't see him in court. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. The eviction took a bit longer, as these things do. But without me paying the mortgage, I decided to sell the condo. I told the bank I was selling. I listed it. The for sale sign on the lawn was the final nail in the coffin for Brian's free ride. He moved back in with Mom and Dad before the 30 days were up, probably because he couldn't handle the shame of the neighbors watching the real estate agents come and go. So now, my parents, in their late 60s, have their 36-year-old son living in their childhood bedroom again. They are paying his legal fees. They are driving him around because he has no car. They are living the reality they enabled. And me? The first month of no contact was weird. I kept reaching for my phone to share good news, then remembering I had no one to call. But then the peace settled in. I noticed my bank account growing. Without the $450 car payment, the $120 phone bill, the condo mortgage, and the random loans, I had an extra $3,000 a month. I reinvested it in my business. I hired 2 new staff members. We landed a massive contract with a tech firm in Scottsdale. I bought myself a new laptop, a better one. Top of the line. 6 months passed. Then a year. I heard snippets of news through a cousin I still talk to. Brian was miserable. He was working at a Home Depot now. Court-ordered employment was part of his probation. No more art. He was loading lumber. My dad was stressed about money. Mom was praying for my soul. I didn't reach out. Then, about 18 months after the incident, I was at a Trader Joe's in Scottsdale. I was grabbing some flowers for my dining room table. I turned the corner of the aisle and there he was. Brian. He looked different. He had cut his hair short. He wasn't wearing the trendy, hobo-chic clothes he used to wear. He was wearing a polo shirt and jeans. He looked older, tired, but grounded. He saw me. He froze. He was holding a basket with frozen dinners. My instinct was to run, but I didn't. I stood my ground. "Lauren," he said. His voice wasn't arrogant. It wasn't the voice that said, "Oops." It was quiet. "Brian," I said. He looked at his shoes. I heard you're doing well. Cousin Sarah said you landed the TechFlow account." "I did," I said. He nodded. He looked like he wanted to say a million things. He looked at me, then took a deep breath. "I'm sorry," he said. It wasn't a long speech. He didn't blame Dad. He didn't blame stress. He just said it. "I know I stole from you," he continued, looking me in the eye. "I know I acted like an entitled prick. You were right. About everything. Actually working for a living. It sucks. But I get it now. I get why you were so mad." I looked at him. I searched for the lie. I searched for the angle. But I didn't see one. I saw a man who had been humbled by life. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. "That means something." "I'm paying you back," he said. "The restitution comes out of my check automatically. But I'm almost done." "I know," I said. "I see the deposits. Mom and Dad miss you," he added softly. They're still mad. But they miss you." "I miss them too," I said. "But I can't go back to how it was, Brian. I can't be the bank. I can't be the doormat." "I know," he said. "You shouldn't have to be." I told them that. Last week, I told Dad to stop complaining about you. I told him you saved me from myself. That shocked me. Brian defending me to Dad? "Well," I said, feeling a lump in my throat. "I'm glad you're doing better, Brian. Really." "Yeah, me too." He shifted his basket. "Hey, I'm not asking for anything, I swear. But maybe if you ever want to get coffee? Hey, my treat. Dutch Brothers." I looked at my brother, the man who threw my laptop in a pool, the man who I had arrested. I hesitated. The old Lauren would have said yes immediately. The angry Lauren would have said, "Go to hell." The new Lauren? The Lauren who knew her worth? "Maybe," I said with a small smile. "Let's finish the restitution payments first. Call me when the balance is 0. He smiled. A real smile this time, not a smirk. "Fair enough. 3 more months." 3 more months, I agreed. I walked away. I didn't look back. I bought my flowers. I drove home to my quiet, peaceful house. I don't know if we'll ever be a happy family again. I don't know if I'll ever go to another barbecue at my parents' house. But I know this. I stood up for myself. I drew a line in the sand, or rather, in the pool water. And because I did, for the first time in our lives, my brother grew up. And I became free. So, to everyone watching who is dealing with a family member who drains you, who disrespects you, who thinks family is a magic word that excuses abuse, don't be afraid to walk away. Don't be afraid to call the tow truck. Don't be afraid to let them fall. Sometimes, hitting rock bottom is the only way they learn how to build a foundation. And sometimes, the price you pay for saying no is actually the price of your own freedom. And trust me, it's worth every penny. The 3 months following that unexpected encounter with Brian at Trader Joe's were, ironically, more difficult than the 18 months of silence that preceded them. You would think that seeing my brother humbled, working a regular job, and taking responsibility would bring me a sense of immediate calm. And in a way, it did. But it also opened a door that I had bolted shut, bricked over, and plastered with warning signs. By cracking that door open just an inch, by saying, "Call me when the balance is zero," I had let the draft in. And with that draft came the whispers of the past, the doubts, and the aggressive hope of my parents. I didn't tell Mom and Dad that I had seen Brian. I knew better. I knew that if I gave them a single crumb of information, they would try to bake an entire wedding cake of reconciliation out of it. They would assume the war was over, the treaty was signed, and that we could all go back to the way things were, with me as the ATM and them as the benevolent observers. But Brian told them. Of course he did. He was living in their house. He probably came home with his frozen dinners and mentioned he saw me. He probably didn't mean to start a fire, but in the Mitchell household, even a spark is dangerous. It started about 3 days after the supermarket meeting. I was at my office, reviewing the quarterly budget for the TechFlow project. My business was booming. I had just promoted my lead designer to art director, which meant I could finally step back from the daily creative grind and focus on expansion. I was looking at spreadsheets, feeling that specific satisfaction that comes from numbers balancing perfectly. Then the receptionist line blinked. "Lauren," Jessica said, her voice hesitant. "Your mother is on line 1. She says it's an emergency involving your father's health." My heart hammered against my ribs. The health card. It was the ultimate trump card in the toxic parent deck. If I didn't answer and something was actually wrong, I would never forgive myself. If I did answer and it was a lie, I would hate myself for falling for it. I took a breath, steeled my nerves, and picked up. "Is he okay?" I asked, skipping the hello. "Oh, Lauren." My mother's voice was breathless, frantic. "Thank God you answered. It's his heart. The stress. The doctor says his blood pressure is through the roof. He's risking a stroke." "Is he in the hospital?" I asked, my hand hovering over my car keys. No, he's here in his recliner," she said, the panic in her voice dialing down just a fraction, shifting into a familiar wheedling tone. "But he's just so heartbroken. Brian told us he saw you. He told us you spoke." "Lauren, honey, if you're ready to talk to Brian, surely you can come over for Sunday dinner? Your father, I don't know how much time he has left with this level of worry." I slowly lowered my hand from the keys. I sat back in my chair. "Mom," I said, my voice flat, "did the doctor actually say he is risking a stroke? Or is that your interpretation?" "He's on medication," she snapped, offended that I wasn't rushing to the car. "And stress is the silent killer. How can you be so cold? Brian said you were nice. He said you smiled. Why are you punishing us?" "I'm not punishing you. I'm waiting," I said. "I gave Brian a condition. When the restitution is paid in full, we will have coffee. Not a family dinner. Not a Sunday roast. Coffee. Just him and me." "But that's 3 months away," she wailed. "Christmas is coming up. You're really going to make us go through another Christmas without the family together? Over money? I told your father to just write you a check for the balance so we can end this nonsense." My spine stiffened. "Do not do that." "Why not?" she challenged. It's all the same money in the end. If Dad pays it, Brian is clear, and we can be a family again by the holidays. No, I said, gripping the phone so tight I thought the plastic might crack. The money isn't the point, Mom. The point is Brian paying it. The point is him feeling the weight of that debt leaving his paycheck every week. If you pay it for him, he learns nothing. And if you pay it, I will know. And I will not meet him. You are so stubborn, she cried. You care more about your lesson than your father's life. I care about my brother becoming a man, I said. And I care about my own sanity. If Dad pays that debt, the deal is off. Tell Brian that. Tell Dad that. I hung up. I sat there, staring at my office wall. The emergency was a fabrication, a hook to drag me back in. But the threat was real. They were going to try to bail him out again. They couldn't help themselves. They were addicted to saving him just as much as he was addicted to being saved. I needed insurance. I called Andrew Cole, my lawyer. Andrew, I said when he picked up, I need you to contact the district attorney's office regarding Brian's restitution payments. Is he late? Andrew asked, his voice sharp. No, but I suspect a third party might try to make a lump sum payment on his behalf to clear the probation early. Can we block that? Andrew hummed in thought. Technically, restitution is just a debt. The court doesn't usually care who pays it, as long as the victim gets made whole. However, since this was part of a plea deal involving probation and taking responsibility, we might be able to flag it. But Lauren, if they send a check to the clerk of courts, the clerk is just going to cash it. Okay, I said. Then I need to know source of funds. Can we request a notification if the payment method changes from his payroll deduction to a personal check? I can ask the probation officer to keep an eye on it, Andrew said. I'll tell him you're concerned about the integrity of his rehabilitation process. It's a valid concern. For the next 2 months, I lived in a state of high-functioning anxiety. Every time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be a notification that the balance had dropped to 0 because Dad had panicked and written a check. I threw myself into work to distract myself. I took on a pro bono project for a local women's shelter, helping them rebrand their fundraising campaign. It felt good to use my skills for people who actually appreciated the help, rather than demanding it. One evening in November, about a month before our agreed deadline, I was leaving the shelter after a meeting. It was dark, the air was crisp, and the streetlights were humming. I saw a familiar car parked across the street. It was my parents' sedan. My stomach dropped. Had they followed me? Stalked me? I walked toward my car, ignoring them, but the driver's door opened. It was my father. He looked older. Mom hadn't been lying about that. He had lost weight. His shoulders were stooped, and he moved with a stiffness I hadn't seen before. He wasn't the imposing figure who used to grill burgers and tell me that family was everything. He looked like a tired old man. Lauren, he called out. His voice wasn't angry. It was just weary. I stopped. I kept the car door between us. Dad, what are you doing here? I saw your post on LinkedIn, he said, gesturing vaguely at his phone. About the shelter. I figured you'd be here. You're checking my LinkedIn? I asked, surprised. I check everything, he admitted. It's the only way I know what my daughter is doing. That hit me, a sharp pang of sadness in the center of my chest. I came to give you this, he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. If that's a check for Brian's restitution, I said, my voice hardening. You can tear it up right now. I won't take it. He shook his head. It's not for Brian. It's for you. He took a few steps closer and placed the envelope on the hood of my car. He didn't try to hug me. He didn't try to come closer. It's a letter, he said. And some photos. From the attic. I was cleaning it out. Found some pictures of you when you started your first lemonade stand. You were so bossy. He gave a weak, watery smile. You organized the whole neighborhood. I knew then you'd be a CEO. I stared at the envelope. Dad, why are you doing this? Because I miss you, he said simply. And because I watched him, Lauren. Watched who? Brian, he said. I've been watching him these last 6 months, since he moved back in. I watched him wake up at 5 a.m. to catch the bus to Home Depot because you took the Jeep. I watched him come home with blisters on his hands. I watched him sit at the kitchen table and budget his paycheck to make sure he had enough for your payment. He looked at me, his eyes shining under the street lamp. I wanted to help him, Dad confessed. Every day I wanted to write the check. I wanted to drive him to work. Mom wanted to make his lunch. But he stopped us. My eyebrows shot up. He did. He told us no, Dad said. He told us that if we helped him, he would lose you forever. He said, Dad, let me do this. I need to know I can do it. I felt the air leave my lungs. He said that. He did, Dad nodded. And watching him, seeing him actually work, seeing him tired but proud, I realized something. I realized we crippled him. All those years, thinking we were loving him, we were just keeping him weak. And you were the only one strong enough to break his legs so he'd have to learn to walk. Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. This was the apology I had waited my entire life for. It wasn't perfect, the metaphor of breaking legs was a bit gruesome, but it was an admission. I'm sorry, Lauren, Dad whispered. I'm sorry I blamed you. You were the parent he needed and I was just a friend. Thank you, Dad. I choked out. Read the letter, he said. Or don't. But just know. We're proud of you. Not just because you're rich, but because you were right. He turned and walked back to his car. He drove away slowly. I stood there in the parking lot for 10 minutes, clutching the envelope. I didn't open it. Not yet. I wasn't ready to let the floodgates open completely. But I put it in my purse next to my wallet. The next few weeks were a blur of anticipation. I monitored the restitution balance like a hawk. November 15th, payment posted. November 30th, payment posted. December 15th, payment posted. The balance was down to $150. One final week of work. It was 2 days before Christmas. The deadline. I was sitting in my living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had plans to go to Aspen with some friends for New Year's. I had a life full of people chosen for their kindness, not their DNA. My phone buzzed. Notification. Victim restitution deposit. $150. Balance. $0. I stared at the screen. It was done. Every single penny of the $5,400 he owed me, plus the court fees, plus the fines, had been paid. By him. By his labor. By lifting lumber and sweeping floors. 5 minutes later, a text came through. Brian, balance is $0. I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. Lauren, I see that. Brian. Coffee? Lauren. Coffee. Brian. Dutch Brothers on Camelback? Tomorrow morning? 9 a.m.? Lauren. It's Christmas Eve, Brian. Brian, I know. Best time for a miracle, right? I smiled. Lauren. See you there. The Dutch Brothers on Camelback Road is a chaotic place. It's loud, the music is always thumping, and the line of cars usually wraps around the block. But there's a small walk-up window and a few metal tables off to the side. I arrived at 8:50 a.m. I was early. I'm always early. It's a control thing. I ordered a black cold brew. I sat at one of the metal tables watching the traffic. The Arizona winter sun was bright but not hot. It was perfect. At 8:58 a.m., a beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't the Jeep. It wasn't a cool car. It was a dented, beige sedan that looked like it had lived 3 hard lives. Brian stepped out. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt tucked into dark jeans. He had boots on, work boots, scuffed and worn but clean. He looked solid. That's the only word I could find. He didn't have that frantic, shifting energy he used to have, the energy of a man constantly looking for an exit or a handout. He walked with weight. He spotted me and waved. He didn't rush. He walked over, holding 2 cups of coffee he must have bought inside. I remembered, he said, setting a cup down in front of me. Black cold brew. No sugar. No joy. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. You remembered. And I got myself a Rebel energy drink because old habits die hard. He grinned, sitting down opposite me. There was a silence then. Not the awkward silence of strangers, but the heavy silence of 2 people standing on opposite sides of a crater, trying to figure out how to build a bridge without falling in. So, I said, you paid it off. Every cent, Brian said. He took a sip of his drink. Took me longer than I thought. They garnish pretty heavily for the court fees too. How was it? I asked. The work. He looked at his hands. They were calloused. There was a small scar on his thumb I hadn't seen before. It was hell, honestly. The first month, I thought I was going to die. Or quit. I almost walked off the job 3 times. Why didn't you? Because I knew you were watching, he said, looking up at me. And I knew Dad was watching. And mostly, because I didn't have a phone to call anyone to complain to. He laughed dryly. Cutting the phone was the masterstroke, Lori. Being alone with my own thoughts at 6 a.m. on a bus. It forces you to actually think. I realized I was 36 years old and I didn't own a single thing. Not my car, not my phone, not my clothes. Everything was leased from you or Mom. And now I own this coffee, he said, tapping the cup. And I bought that piece of junk car for $1,200 cash. Smells like wet dog. But the title has my name on it. Just my name. I nodded, feeling a swell of respect. That's good, Brian. That's really good. He hesitated, tracing the rim of his cup. I moved out. Yesterday. I blinked. You did? I thought you were saving up. I was. I found a studio apartment. It's tiny. It's in a bad neighborhood. But I couldn't stay at Mom and Dad's anymore. I love them, but... He sighed. They're dangerous, Lauren. You were right about that too. Dad tried to give me money last month. Mom tries to do my laundry. I realized if I stayed there, I'd slide back. I'd become the artist again. So, no more art? No, he shook his head. I'm still making stuff, but I do it on weekends. I'm welding scrap metal I find at the dump. I sold a piece last week for $50. Used it to buy groceries. It felt better than selling a piece for $5,000 that you paid for. This was the test. This was the moment. He had said all the right things. He had done the work. But I needed to know if the entitlement was truly dead. So, I said, leaning back, what happens now? Do you want to come to Christmas dinner? Mom says she's making the roast. Brian looked at me, and his expression was serious. I want to, but I'm not sure I should. Why? Because, he said, if I go back there right now, it's going to be a welcome home hero parade. Mom is going to cry. Dad is going to toast me. They're going to act like I just returned from war, not from serving probation for stealing from my sister. I don't deserve a parade, Lauren. I just did what a normal adult is supposed to do. I stared at him. My jaw actually unclenched. Wow, I whispered. I told them I'd come for dessert, he said. For an hour. Then I'm going back to my apartment. I have to work tomorrow anyway. Holiday pay is double time. You're working Christmas Day? Yeah. Home Depot is closed, but I picked up a shift doing security for a construction site. Andrew, your lawyer, he actually hooked me up with the contact. Said he needed someone reliable. I smiled. Andrew, that sneaky, brilliant man. Brian, I said, I'm proud of you. He froze. His eyes welled up instantly. He looked away, blinking rapidly, fighting it. Don't, he choked out. Don't be proud yet. I'm just starting. I am, I insisted. You climbed out of a hole you dug. Most people just keep digging. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the envelope Dad had given me. I hadn't opened it until this morning. Inside there was the letter, but there was also a check. A check from my father for $5,000. The letter said, Use this for whatever you want. Buy yourself something nice. Or don't. It's yours. I slid the envelope across the table to Brian. He looked at it. He looked at me. He recoiled like it was a snake. No, he said firmly. Lauren, no. I just told you. I don't want money. I'm not asking for a loan. It's not a loan, I said. And it's not from me. It's from Dad. He tried to give it to me a month ago. He wanted to pay off your debt. I refused it. Then keep it, Brian said, pushing it back. Open it, I commanded. He opened the envelope. He saw the check. He saw the amount. $5,000. That was life-changing money for him right now. That was a better car. That was 6 months of rent in his new studio. He stared at the check. I watched his face. I saw the hunger there, the old hunger, the desire for the easy fix. Then he took the check. He folded it in half. He tore it. Rip. He tore it again and again, until it was just confetti on the metal table. I don't want it, Brian said, his voice shaking but resolute. If I take that, I'm right back where I started. I need to know I can survive without the Mitchell safety net. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for 2 years. That was it. That was the final proof. Okay, I said. Good choice. I took a sip of my coffee. But I have a proposition for you. I don't want a job at your agency, he said quickly. I don't know anything about marketing. I know, I laughed. And I wouldn't hire you. Nepotism is bad for morale. But I have a client, a boutique hotel downtown. They're doing a renovation. They're looking for industrial local art for their lobby. Large-scale metal sculptures. Brian's eyes widened. The gallery thing was a scam, Lauren. I told you. This isn't a gallery, I said. This is a paid contract. You have to submit a proposal. You have to bid on it. You have to interview. I'm not getting you the job. I'm just giving you the email address of the project manager. If your work is good enough, you get it. If it sucks, you don't. Pure merit. He looked at me. The hope in his eyes wasn't the manic, greedy hope of before. It was the terrified, excited hope of an artist being taken seriously. You'd do that? He asked. After I destroyed your computer? You paid for the computer, I said. The debt is settled. We're square. Now we're just networking. He smiled. A crooked, boyish smile that reminded me of when we were kids, before the money and the resentment ruined everything. Send me the email, he said. I'll draft a proposal tonight. Don't you have security duty? I'll do it on my break, he said. We finished our coffee. We talked about small things, the weather, the Cardinals game, the weird guy at his work who eats onions like apples. It was normal. It was boring. It was beautiful. When we stood up to leave, Brian hesitated. He looked like he wanted to hug me, but he wasn't sure if he was allowed. I stepped forward and hugged him. It was stiff at first, but then he squeezed me tight. He smelled like soap and metal and cold brew. Merry Christmas, Lauren, he whispered. Merry Christmas, Brian. I watched him get into his dented Honda and drive away. I walked to my Audi. I sat in the driver's seat and looked at the pile of torn check paper on the table. The wind picked up a piece and blew it away. I realized then that the laptop in the pool was the best investment I ever made. Cost me $3,000, but the return on investment was priceless. It bought my brother his manhood. It bought my parents a reality check. And it bought me my brother back. Not the leech, but the man he was supposed to be. I started the car. I had a dinner to get to. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading it. This story isn't just about a laptop or a loan. It's about the difference between helping and enabling. For years, I thought I was helping my brother by cushioning his falls. I thought love meant never saying no. But in reality, I was robbing him of his own resilience. I was solving problems he needed to solve himself to grow. When I finally drew that hard boundary, when I let him hit rock bottom, it wasn't an act of cruelty. It was the most loving thing I could have done. We often fear that boundaries will destroy relationships. And sometimes they do destroy the unhealthy version of the relationship. But as Brian showed me, they also clear the ground for a healthy one to grow. He had to lose the banker sister to find the supporter sister, and I had to lose the guilt to find my own peace. If you are the fixer in your family, ask yourself, are you helping them fly? Or are you just holding them up so they never have to use their wings? I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Have you ever had to use tough love on a family member? Did it work, or did they walk away? Or, if this story resonated with you and you think boundaries are necessary, just comment good below so I know we're on the same page. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.